In this tutorial, we are going to use the clipping mask in Illustrator. So what we need is some texture samples and we need some clothes paths that we should have already traced. So from my texture samples, I've created them by editing my texture samples in Photoshop. I've gotten rid of the white background and I've got two examples here. So my original one was this yellow to orange, and then I've played with the hue and saturation to really show up that red by going here, image adjustments, hue saturation. Once I've got textures that I like, I'm going to go save as and make sure that they are saved as TIFF files and save the transparency. So then we are going to come and open them in Illustrator. So we're going to go to File, then Place, and find the texture that we want. And it's really important when the little icon comes up under your arrow that you just click and it will place in the maximum size that we can use for this texture. If I was to make this any bigger, the pixels are kind of going to become distorted and pixelated. So to use the clipping mask to kind of create this artwork here, what I've done is got my closed path, which is this petal shape. And I am going to put that on top of my texture. Now if I click off, I can see my texture is actually on top of my path. So I'm going to click and right click, go to Arrange and go Send to Back. Okay? And then I'm going to click and highlight both of them. So I've got my texture underneath, my path on top, and make sure that my path has no fill, okay? Then we're going to go to Object, scroll down to Clipping Mask, and then select Make. And what will happen is whatever texture is behind is going to end up enclosed in the path that you put on top. I'm going to also do that for my second petal. And I'm going to select a kind of ready to orange section and send my texture to the back, arrange, send to back. I'm going to click and select both. Now what is really good to note as well is that obviously you don't want a huge texture and a tiny little shape, because you'll notice when I kind of click and hover over my petal, it does select sometimes my whole texture, which is behind it. And so it can get really annoying if you've got a tiny little circle path, but a huge texture. So if you like, you can even make your kind of paths a bit bigger to fit your texture, or vice versa, make your textures a little bit smaller. So click and drag to select both of them. We're going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And now I have two petals, which is looking good. And to create this flower up here, what I have done is actually clicked on one of them and gone up to this opacity. And I've turned it down a little bit so I get this nice overlay effect, which is really nice for botanicals or feathers if you're using them for kind of any animals. And then all I've done is duplicated this all the way around this circle here. So the steps for that is selecting my petal and clicking R on your keyboard. Then I'm going to hold Alt, and click the center of my circle. And what this does is bring up this little icon. And I'm going to put in there how many times I want my petals to kind of rotate around my circle. So my circle is 360 degrees and I'm going to say I want them to rotate maybe 14 times, for example. And I have a little preview here, and that's going to show me the distance of the first segment. So I actually think that could be too much. So I'll go 360, maybe I want them to rotate 10 times instead. Whoops, 360/10. So they'll be a bit further apart. Okay, we'll go copy. Sure. And to duplicate that, I'm going to go Command D. All the way. That should be enough. Oops. Command D. So that's kind of a quick way to do a flower. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to show you one more time with using clipping mask option. On this little cockatoo picture, I have a path here, if you can see, and it's a tree branch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put one of my brown textures to become part of that branch. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my layer that says tree. Yep. And I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to select my brown texture, which I have already edited in Photoshop. Best to get rid of the white if possible. And actually I haven't done much editing here. So I'm going to turn that. I can't make this any bigger because it would be pixelated if I was to do that. So what I might do instead is make my tree path a little bit smaller. Where's my tree? If I can select that. There we go. Made my tree a little bit smaller to fit my texture. Okay, so my texture is above my tree. So I'm going to go right click, arrange, center back. I can see my tree sitting on top. I'm going to click and select my path, which is my tree, and also my brown texture. Object, clipping mask, make. Okay. So I have got a tree, which the cockatoo is now sitting on top of. Again, I think I might just turn the opacity down a little bit to make it a bit more transparent. I can put my background on. And then you can see that my cockatoo poster, I could maybe put a few leaves, but it's almost completed. I've got some block color shapes there. I've got a watercolor brush for the wings and the tail, and then a texture for the tree. No more textures are really required for that one because it's already looking pretty busy. So that's how we use the clipping mask tool with your own textures in Illustrator.